Okay, awesome. You're going to take that seat over there. We're back. So I did promise earlier we're speaking to a lead author from the IPCC. It's Yamina. Hello, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you for the invitation.
So we need to talk data and stats. We know that you've got new reports out, but tell us a little bit more about what it is that the IPCC does, how long these reports take to produce. Can you just give us a little bit of context real quick?
Yes, sure. So the IPCC stands for the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change. It was put in place in 1988, but by two international organizations, United Nations Environment Programme and the World Meteorological Organization. The first report was published in 1990.
I mean, a while ago.
Yeah, and we just finalized. We are at the sixth round cycle, and each cycle lasts around 5 to 6 years. Our cycle did last a little bit longer because of the COVID, so we had to work remotely. And we have three different reports, three different groups. One is about climate science, so it looks at the physics of climate. This report was launched in August last year. The second one is about adaptation, and it was launched in February this year. And the last report is the one I contributed to, is about climate mitigation, or in other words, about solutions. So for this one, for the third report, we were 278 authors. So it's 278 times 2 hands writing. And we had several contributing authors from different parts of the world. So the authors are experts from all countries. In our case, we had 65 countries represented. 41% are developing countries, are authors from developing countries, and the rest are from developed countries. In our group, we are not very good in gender balance, because our group is about more economics and engineering, and girls are not really encouraged to do these things. So that's why we are very, very rare girls. And that's why we are 29% of females and the rest are males. So there is still progress to be done from this perspective. And then the report itself is, we synthesize, we read all, our job is to read, and we do it on voluntary basis. So we are not paid for that. That's an important point. So our job is to read all the literature related to climate change mitigation, to the solutions, and to summarize this in a way that is understandable. So this is the main report. And then we have what we call the summary for policymakers. This part of the report, this one, is the one that is approved line by policymakers. So we spent 2 weeks online with representatives from all countries and going through our wording, and they were saying, okay, this is clear, but this one is not clear. Sorry, I don't understand it. This does not make sense to policymakers. Can you please clarify it? And this is how it works. And then if there is disagreement, so this means that it may disappear from the summary for policymakers, but it stays in the main report. So the most important thing is that the main report is really science, and nothing changed in the main report. So it is accepted by government and not approved line by government. And the full report is around 3,000 pages.
Okay, so 3,000 pages is a lot of words for a report. Can you maybe give us some of the key takeaways?
Okay, there are plenty, yeah? Because the last report was from 2014, and this one we are almost more than 7 years later. So a lot has changed. We understand much better the solutions that do not work and the solutions that would work or that are already working. And we have better understanding on how to avoid to be above the 1.5 degree target. So there are a lot. Maybe one important point is that in the past we were used to look at policies to solutions for climate change from supply side. So, for example, decarbonization of heat, electricity production, etc. What is new is that for the first time in this report, we have a full chapter on the demand. So, what would be the impact of reducing the demand? and looking to the overall economy from the demand perspective. And this is a game changer in terms of thinking, and it's going to be a game changer. We expect that this is going to be a game changer from policy making perspective. So I give you an example. What does that mean? So if you have, for example, in the past, we had policies to decarbonize. The focus was mainly about renewable energy, and if it does not work, then negative emissions. If it works, etc. Now, if you look at it from the demand perspective, so your first question is, what do people, and when I say people, it means all people in the world, and it's not just for white people in the global north. What do people need for their well-being? The needs, the essential needs of all of us are the same. It does not matter if you are in Dakar, in Paris, in New York, or whatever city in the world, because we are human beings, we have the same basic needs. And then how to satisfy these needs? So what you need a shelter, you need a comfortable home, a comfortable place where to live, where to be in love, where to work, etc. We all have this need. And then the question is, how do we supply this within the planetary boundaries? And when we consider the planetary boundaries, in our case, so you look at the remaining carbon budget to be within the Paris Agreement, within the 1.5 degree target. So this means that you will have to rethink your policies and your solutions by each time you think about providing shelters. It's not just to have something beautiful, but it's about providing something that is within the planetary, within the remaining carbon budget. And this is going to be a big change for the future, we expect, in terms of policy.
Wow, so there's lots of policy changes, but you also mentioned the report suggests some solutions. Can you maybe give us examples of a few of the solutions that are suggested in the latest report?
So maybe one point is that the IPCC is policy relevant, but not policy prescriptive. So, and policymakers during the approval sessions, they reminded us several times that we were not there to say to them, this is what you should be doing. So it's their job. Our job is just to bring to them what science, the scientific evidence. And among the solutions, for example, what we find out in the literature is the concept of sufficiency, which is known in some countries, but unknown in the majority of the countries. So we were asked to define the concept because it was too technical and new for most of the policymakers. And sufficiency is about avoiding the demand for energy, materials, water, land, while providing to each of us well-being within planetary boundaries. And when said in this way, so this means that it's about equity for all, equity between all of us within the remaining carbon budget. And this means that, for example, for the global north, we need to revise our climate neutrality targets. So if I take the EU, for example, but I'm not saying this is IPCC, just as an EU citizen, I'm saying that. I'm not allowed as IPCC to say that. So as a scientist, if you look at the European Union climate neutrality target, we are leading. We are the best. If you compare to all other ones, we are the best. But in reality, this target does not take into account the European responsibility in the climate damage. So what does it mean? It means that we allow ourselves to continue to pollute, and this means that we are taking the right of other countries who did not contribute to the pollution, to the climate change damage, to develop. But if you look at it, if you apply the sufficiency concept to this target, then this means that instead of having a target to become climate neutral by 2050, the EU should become climate neutral by 2033. So you see, it's not the same. And if it's 2033, it's tomorrow. So basically, yesterday, the European Commission published a new, to repower new recommendations, a new set of proposals to repower the EU, given the war in the Ukraine. It's for this decade. But actually, it should have used the Ukraine crisis to adapt our current policies to make sure that we are in line with the equity issue that is raised by the Paris Agreement, actually. And this equity issue is quite new. And that's why it's not yet in the policy making. But usually what we see is that what is in the IPCC report, even if it's not prescriptive, we see it in policies in 10 years, 10, 15 years, except that this time we don't have enough time left. So the time for action is now. Our countries, and I will say this as an EU citizen, the EU should actually read carefully the IPCC report. And when reading between the lines, if science is saying that we should not go in this direction, that this direction is wrong, it means from policymaking perspective, we should not go in this direction.
And for those who want to download the report, presumably you can just download it straight from the IPCC website.
Yeah. You can download it. It's free of charge, of course. Unfortunately, for the time being, it exists only in English. When I said it's 3,000 pages, it's the full report. The summary for policymakers is just 63 pages. I hope it's readable. But I had an experience with my student at Sciences Po, the Political Institute, the Institute for Political Science in Paris. And so I asked my student to read the summary for policymakers. So you have one from each group. So when I say 3,000 pages, it's just our report, the one on solutions. So you also have 3,000 pages from the first two groups. So in total, you need to read almost 10,000 pages. But I asked my student to read the summary for policymakers from the three groups, which is already 60 pages for each, approximately. And they have read them, and I helped them to understand the summary for policymakers, and then they did come up with a conclusion, because I told them, what is your recommendation? They said, this is not a summary. 63 pages is not summary, I'm sorry. And they prepared for us recommendations, and they said, oh, we need 2-3 pages. And they explained to me, you know, we are the young generation. We don't read 63 pages. We will never read that. So
63 as a summary is a little bit much, but it is completely available for people to go and download.
It's completely available.
So I'm consciously aware of the time. I just want like a word, like if you could leave people with a single word in order for them to make the most out of this conference today, over the next 3 days, what would it be?
I would say that the time for action is now. This decade is extremely important for our future in this planet. And to make sure that the right things will happen, we need to put pressure, especially in our democracies on our policymakers to do the right things, because currently they are not doing the right things.